Today's gospel lesson is probably one of the most well-known of the Christian gospels. It's certainly the best known of Jesus' parables. And what I'm tempted to do, and I think what we often are tempted to do when we read a scripture that's just so very familiar, we want to skip over it and go to whatever else follows it. And when we do that, we mute God's message. Because oftentimes I'll read the same scripture that I've read many, many times, and I'll hear a different message. So our lesson today starts with a conversation between a lawyer and Jesus. And the lawyer has an agenda. He wants to pigeonhole Jesus. And what's important to know, the lawyer in our case is not a trial lawyer, it's not Perry Mason, it's not an estate planning or real estate lawyer. The lawyer in this case is a theological expert on Jewish law. He's a scholar. The Jewish laws and the rules have been so codified, become so complex by that time, by Jesus' time, that we had to have someone to interpret it for us. So it's not as a lawyer as we think today. So the dialogue starts out today. The lawyer asks Jesus the question, "What must I do to inherit eternal life?" First of all, it's a flawed question. We don't choose to inherit anything. Someone else chooses to give us the gift. So what Jesus does, he knows that the lawyer is trying to trap him, and they're going to have this dialogue. And this is not a warm and fuzzy dialogue. The word test is used in the gospel lesson. I would rather use testy as a translation. But the same root word that's used in the gospel lesson today is the same one that was used when Satan tempted Jesus earlier in the gospel. So Jesus flips the question around on the lawyer and says, "What is written in the law? What have you read here?" And he responds very quickly. He says, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind. And love your neighbor as yourself." This is such an easy, quick, standard, rote response. It was something that a first-year bar mitzvah student would give back to the rabbi. But Jesus acknowledged, "You've given the right answer. Do this, and you will live." But the lawyer is not willing to give up. He wants to press Jesus further, and he says, "And who is my neighbor?" It seems like such a simple question. Everyone's our neighbor. But who our neighbor was, it becomes such a subject for Jewish scholars to debate who was the neighbor. It was required to follow the law perfectly. And if you knew who your neighbor was, you know who you had to treat neighborly. So we need to understand who the four players are in our lesson this morning. The first is the Samaritan. What we know is that he's a frequent traveler on this route. He's been on it many times. But the Samaritans were despised. They were looked down on by the Israelites, all the way back to the Babylonian captivities where we find the roots. Then there's the traveler. We really don't know much about this traveler. We know that he's stripped. There's no clothing to help identify who this person might be. And the gospel lesson said he was half dead, which means he probably wasn't dead. He was probably injured, maybe moaning or in pain. But we really don't know who this traveler is. Then the priest and the Levite come along. And by this time, the Jewish Mishnah had categorized the importance of people in the Jewish community. The priest is at the top of the pier. Then the Levite is somewhere just under that. Levite would probably be best understood in today as a lay leader in the church. He's an assistant in the temple. Then there's the ordinary, everyday Israelites, but all of these people are certainly above and seen, viewed by the priest as having a higher place and being more important than this Samaritan. And what we see happening here is the priest is categorizing people. He's classifying, he's compartmentalizing based on their faith. And what happens is we start compartmentalizing people. people and we start putting them into some sort of hierarchy of importance, we lose the value, to understand their value as a human being. Well, the dialogue continues, and Jesus said, "Which of these three do you think was neighbor to the man who fell into the house of the robber?" It's so obvious who the neighbor was, but yet that Samaritan couldn't utter the word. The priest couldn't utter the word Samaritan. The priest responded, "The one who showed him mercy." The Samaritans were so despised, he couldn't even raise the name. So why did the Levite walk by? It wasn't that they're in a hurry. Maybe it's not even because they're callous. Because the priest, had he gone and rendered aid to the stranger, and possibly dead, he could have been rendered ritually unclean and wouldn't have been able to practice in the temple for a period of time. And then though the Levite didn't follow this same set of rigid rules, there's chances are that he would have had to go through some sort of cleaning process. It was more important to follow the rules than to render aid to someone in need. We know that the traveler from Samaria stopped and not only rendered aid, he put the man on his donkey or whatever the burden was, and he took him to the inn and made sure that he was taken care of. He even arranges to pay for his care. It's the Samaritan, the despised, the unclean, who showed compassion, who showed pity, who exemplified true neighborliness. In today's society, if this Good Samaritan story were rewritten today, it might read something like this. Today, a man was beaten and lay bleeding. Everyone grabbed their cell phones and made a video that they could post on Facebook and get likes. Getting the picture becomes more important than coming to the aid of a man. And we can chuckle, but this happened last week at Disney World, where a man was beating two women. There's lots of videos, but there was only one person that initially went to aid. Happened to be a high school football coach from Texas. There's a message of compassion in our gospel lesson today, and it's so easy to stop here and say we got it. There's a moral message for us. Or maybe we see a message where religious leaders proclaim something, but they don't follow through and practice it. I believe in our lesson today there's even a more important lesson than when we dig down underneath. We take a deeper dive. What we see in the lesson today is a subversive undercurrent, a troubling element about the human condition. What Jesus has done in the parable is he's exposed the exclusive racial character of a lawyer's fundamental beliefs. The priest viewed himself in some sort of elevated status better than the Samaritans and others. The parable becomes an indictment of our favorite of community. People who seek to live their lives in a narrow world of exclusiveness. The parable challenges the racial and ritual individualism that makes it possible for human beings to categorize people into groups and set priorities just to justify their existence. It's a way that one group can establish power over another group and show that the others are diminished in value. In the parable, Jesus challenges anyone who would claim God's love for themselves and at the same time harbor hate and resentment toward other human beings, for race, or religion, or whatever the bias is. The story strips away a false sense of importance created by the class markers that puts all of us in the need of a neighbor. The parable pushes us to embrace a radical ethic, a worldview of community where everyone has value. There are people that will find a difference in a group of people and just enough to start distinguishing against them, and eventually the group loses all of its humanity. Differences in race, faith, political ideologies, cultures, languages, anything, sexual orientation, become the foundation for prejudice to take root. It makes the soil fertile for prejudice to grow in our society. This compartmentalizing is placing people in a hierarchy, just gives us unjust power over others. The others somehow seem a little less human. Its ability to exploit differences, and much of the prejudice and dissension that we see in the world today finds its roots in this kind of attitude. Racial bias in this country has certainly improved since I was a child, but it's still alive and well and flourishing. We live in a society that encourages us to place barriers on ourselves. This past fall, I was visiting a town in central Texas. I was talking to the community leaders in this town about a 2.25-hour drive from Austin. They were telling me about what was going on in the community, and I asked the question, what are the issues in your community? One of the members of that group said diversity. And spontaneously, the gentleman sitting next to me, without even thinking about it, said, do you know those people? And he went on. It wasn't getting comfortable. It wasn't going to get any better. That prejudice is alive and well in some of our communities. Today we live in a world where 72 million people, according to the United Nations, are displaced. There were 2.3 million people displaced last year, the highest ever in the history that the United Nations has kept track since 1950. Every second refugee is a child. The thirst for power, fueled by human indifference, have led to the largest diaspora, probably in the history of the world, but certainly since World War II. People are threatened, they're manipulated, they're coerced, they're herded like animals to fit someone else's agenda. And it's easy to see this on the evening news or read about it in a magazine and think about it being so far in distance away from us. But regardless of our political ideologies and our views, we only have to drive 5 hours south of Austin, Texas to see it being played out in real time. This summer I went to Hamburg, Germany for an international conference of a service group that I'm a member of. This group has 1.2 million members. There are going to be 31,000 people at this conference. By the way, that's a lot of people in the room at one time. And we jokingly say we're going to go meet 31,000 of our very best friends. That group is diversity on steroids. Every race, every religion, including African tribal religions, were there. Every culture, different languages spoken. Everything was different except one thing. All the people who were there were gathered together because they wanted to be part of a community that could make a difference in their local communities and in the global community. Though it's not a religious organization, I believe the group portrays Jesus' message that underpins in the Good Samaritan story today. It's a microcosm of what can be done when we tear down the barriers that so often separate us. God's message of love was obscured by the codification of the Jewish laws. The late Jewish rabbi, first century rabbi named Akiba, captured the attitude of the time. As he talked to his students, he said the study of the law is of higher rank than practicing it. It's so easy to develop prejudices and separate people into categories. Timothy said, I charge you before God and the Lord Jesus Christ and the elect angels, if you observe these things without prejudice and doing nothing with partiality. The problem with our prejudices and our biases and all is oftentimes we don't even know we have them. I don't believe that gentleman I was talking to last year, it was so ingrained to the fabric of his being, it was just an instantaneous response. We have to become aware of the biases that we hold if we're going to overcome them and treat everyone in the human family the same. The American comedian George Carlin had a riff that he shared with us. It was on neighborliness. George said, another plan I have for world peace through formal introduction. The idea is that everyone in the world would be required to meet everyone else in the world formally at least once. You have to look the person in the eye. You have to shake their hands. You have to repeat their name. And try to remember one physical characteristic about them. He said, my theory is that if you knew everyone in the world personally, you'd be less inclined to fight them in a war. At our baptismal covenant, we make 3 promises. We ask 3 questions and we respond to them. Will you proclaim the word by word and example the good news of God in Christ? Will you seek to serve Christ in all persons, loving your neighbor as yourself? And will you strive for justice and peace among all people, the respect and dignity of every human being? Of course, we respond, I will, with God's help, but we certainly can't do it on our own. We've been a pretty good failure as a human race at that. But then again, nothing is impossible with God's grace. Amen.